thing. You have to have a food secure environment. If you don't, doesn't matter what you do. That's their major source of stress and anxiety. You need people who understand. And those of you who've been around for a while, you trained yourselves, you figured things out, even though you didn't have any formal training, and you understand. But new staff don't. Prader Willi's really hard to get, you know? Hard to understand. I have trouble explaining. They don't believe it because some of them are so articulate. I've had auditors when I remember Lester. Auditors came, you know, from, well, then it was DMH, and took them aside because they were interviewing how's life here, blah, blah, blah. The auditor came out and said, oh my God, abuse, da-da, which is why we don't encourage talk therapy all that much. Because he was trying to get something and got into the auditor's ear, but they knew us. You need consistent routines. They can't self-motivate. They won't. And realistic expectations. We often overestimate their capabilities. That happens in schools all the time. Because they have a lot of skills, and some of them are very articulate. And support for change and transitions, always. That's a priority. Now, this idea of a yes environment, I made that up. That wasn't the first one. A yes environment, what that means is, I come back from day program, I walk into the group home and I go, everything's cool. Just like when an alcoholic goes into rehab, he goes, nice, I guess it's out of my hands now. That enables him, or enables our Prader Willi folks, to do something else that's more meaningful. Play a game with the staff person, take a walk, rest for a while, because they don't have to worry about any of this. If you don't have that secure, safe, organized environment, they're going to be worried about something. Who's coming into work today? Who's the staff? And it's endless. When I would do housekeeping chores that they might have, I'd also put a staff name with it. And you know what? The staff loved it. Because when they walked in the door, even if they were new, they're like, oh, I know what I need to do. We had the lowest turnover in the agency because of that. I think it's because of that. Now this is sort of a strategy. I'm sorry about that. Oh, no, it's okay. That should be around. Anyway, this is hard to do. If you can start every response with a yes, you'll gain some leverage. So, yes, we are going outside, so let's get your laundry finished. As opposed to, the minute you start with, if any of you had young children, the minute you start with no, even though you're going to end up with a yes, you lost them at no. So instead of no, we can't go right now, but we can go later, this is yes, great idea. Or if it can't happen that day, oh, I love that. Let's put it on the calendar for tomorrow. Say yes as much as you can. These folks have had a lifetime of no's. No, you can't have that. No, you can't go there. No, you can't. No, you can't. No, you can't. No, you can't. That's why they lie and steal. Here's another one. It's very common in behavioral world and stuff. If you finish doing your laundry, you can have your iPad. Instead of that, say, when you finish your laundry, you can have your iPad. If sounds like a threat, because it is. If you finish, the other side of that is, and if you don't, right? When assumes that it's, you gotta be like, of course it's gonna happen. It assumes the activity will be completed, and the other thing is it puts the responsibility on the individual, not you. Oh yeah, when your laundry's done, you can do that. And they probably need help with their laundry. It's just a better more adult approach than you always being the one to say, you gotta do this, you gotta do this, you gotta do, or else. Well, we wanna talk about SID, is that worthwhile? So most people do skin pick. They almost all pick around their cuticles. See that, but so do we, let's face it. But there's other more serious situations. Those of you who were Lester know he picked off. And did you know he never picked before he did that? Never picked his skin. He was at Hempstead then, and all of a sudden he just picked off the side of his. We could not figure it out. We just couldn't figure out why he did it. Hair pulling, ripping off toenails. So there's a big range of skin picking, and you know who your people are. And they pick where they prefer to pick where you don't normally see. They're not stupid. So if there's any bump, it's gonna get picked. Mosquito bite, anything. The other time that they pick is when they're sitting in a classroom, the teacher's talking, or day program, or they're sitting in front of the TV. Idle hands at the devil's workshop. So even if they're engaged in another activity, give them something else to do. If they're watching TV, also give them their coloring book in colors or something, or even a puzzle, so their hands are engaged. I mentioned before, the fidgets, I know they're all the rage, and they may work for some people, but they don't work for everybody. And they don't need them outside of those situations. Like my girl who's trying to eat them the other day, it wasn't that situation. She didn't need her fidgets. So why did she have them? That's a setup. I'm so pissed. So skin picking may serve as a sensory function. I think they have a lot of sensory functions. And there's some stimulation involved. And you can excuse yourself if you want. That's good. Over time, skin picking may serve a social purpose, such as gaining interaction with an adult, telling them to stop, or to avoid an aversive task. So you have to not focus on it. Don't chastise them. It's not their fault. All we can do is try and prevent it. Keep them busy when you know there's downtime like that. What I try and encourage is just, you don't want to shout across the living room, hey, quit picking. That's really wrong. So sometimes you could even make a deal with someone who's a serious skin picker and doesn't want to. Otherwise, if it's the cuticles, I don't care. If it's more serious, I might just give a silent cue. If there's blood involved, I would just put down the Band-Aid and the wipe and keep going. Not a word. They know what to do. Why would you say something? They know what they did. They're skin picking. There's blood. Yeah. Preventive also, keep them as bump-free and lathered up with lotion as possible. It's harder to pick when you're slippery. Make sure, even their lips, a lot of them pick their lips, right? A lot of chapstick. Use lotion all the time, 2-3 times a day. Keep their nails short. And you have to teach them what to do if there's first aid. Never, ever, 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 ever send them to a nurse. And some schools make you do that. If there's a little drop of blood, they have to go to the nurse because staff aren't supposed to touch blood and stuff. But that's often what they want. They get out of whatever's going on, they can relax, they get attention from the nurse. Unless it's so serious that they need wound care, don't go to the nurse. Does that make sense? There is no universal treatment. There's been some successful sensory integration programs. There's this one guy who had been a rectal picker, feces smear since he was like 5. So the agency instituted a program, you popped up, where they first took a baseline where he picks and in time, where in his body he picks, and you know, I heard you have to report picking, but as I pointed out yesterday, if they're picking where you can't see, what are you reporting? But anyway, they instituted a program where he had extra supervision. They changed his meds a little. They got a wooden roller, because they tried different sensory things and he liked that. So as soon as he got up, they would roll his back before he went to the bathroom, because that's where he did his rectal picking. After the bathroom, I mean, they had a whole schedule. Over time, they would, through the extra supervision, started a real legitimate experiment, withdrew the, changed the medication to get back where he was, and what was left was this. Because you want to know what's really making the difference. They kept doing that, no picking, 100%. Another gal liked her hair brushed, and that helped her with her picking. Another person liked foot massages. So this is what's, and sometimes it has failed. Sometimes it has failed, but sure worth a try. Get your baseline and find out what they like. Do it pretty regularly. See what happens. Now this is, I think this has to be doctor ordered, and it's Pharmanet, and it's been very successful for a lot of people, not everybody. So if you haven't tried it, try it. You got nothing to lose. I think it's very important, and some of you know this already, least preferred before more preferred, or if you have somebody who doesn't like to shower, their shower time is right before dinner. When you're finished with your shower, you can have, you'll have dinner. When? For exercise. Oh, when we're finished doing our exercise, we'll have our snack. So set it up for success. At day program's a little tougher, but maybe but you still have lunch, you may have other breaks or tasks that are preferred or not preferred. They don't have internal motivation, period, end of story. We are the external support. I talked about this a bit, plan A, plan B, have it on a calendar, both. You may need a plan C. And I use that analogy, but have it visible. This is what the plan is, however, it could be this. And then when people start to get upset, you say, remember we talked about this? Choices, usually no more than 2. More than 2, you can see their eyes start to go back and forth. But I want to see how I highlighted or I bolded you decide at the day program. I steal a cookie. Or I didn't steal it, Mary gave it to me because I know who the vulnerable people are. I know who doesn't. Lisa, again, took her to a day program, went into this work area, classroom. I'm standing with the teacher. She makes a beeline to a particular area in the class. And I said to the teacher, is she sitting next to probably your most vulnerable person in here who would be most likely to give up her lunch? She said, yep. How she knew, I don't know. I said, well, you better watch that one and don't sit her near trash. But what you can say is, because you're not going to take food away. That could be a knockdown, drag out. You can eat that cookie you took from Mary or that she gave you, and we'll call the house and they'll adjust your dinner accordingly. You decide. You have to start getting things with you being in control. You decide. And you would be surprised how often they might give it back, because if your menu's posted, they probably know exactly what they're having for dinner. And if they like what they're having for dinner and think, well, I really don't want to lose my mashed potatoes, and they like more. There's some research that says if you offered them a choice of a preferred food, let's say a cookie, or a dinner or a big salad or something, they're more likely to choose the more, even if there's a delay. So they decide, and if they eat the cookie, they know what's going to happen. They're going to sit down at the table, and they're going to have no potatoes, and they're not going to like that. You can go for a walk or use the treadmill. You decide. And when we're all finished, we're house set. You can take your shower now or in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. You win no matter what. Right? But you've given them some power over their lives. They like high priority. They'll go to the top if they can. People have gone right to commissioners. I know the parents do too, but sort of the individuals, because you have to give them a list of who to call, right? And they like to keep people in their roles. A doctor is for this, a dietitian is for that, the manager is for that. So if there's an issue in those categories, use those people as the resource. Don't you talk to them about calories in the menu. You say, you write down in the book, as soon as the dietitian comes, Mary wants to know if she can have blah, blah, blah to the dietitian. And when the dietitian comes in, they can answer it in writing or directly, whatever. But get it out of their head. And of course, mom is right up there with God. And it's really hard to beat that one. Stubborn, there's a lot of reasons for refusals. The task in a day program may be perceived as too difficult. Perceived. They're not finished with what they were doing. They already have their mindset and doing something else and they're not telling you about it. Maybe they're about to scoot out to get some food from somewhere and they have a deal with someone in the bathroom. Or the activity, let's say you give them a new job and they've never done it before and they're not really sure how long it's going to take. They are very worried about whether or not it's going to interfere with lunch. I always tell psychologists, do not do testing close to lunch, because, do it first thing in the morning, make sure it's clear when it'll end, they will have their same lunch. Otherwise, what happens is the responses on the IQ test just drop, or whatever it is, just drop. They're looking at the clock. Their anxiety is too high. Sometimes they just don't care. I'm not interested. Or the request is put in the form of a demand rather than a respectful request. You need to do this, as opposed to, hey, I have this work I'd like you to do with me. Very different. And we forget that. Sit-down strikes, any of you people have sit-down strikes where they literally sit down and go on strike? Those are very hard. It always works. Sometimes they will do it from the bus or car in the road to the day program. They'll do it in a store, anywhere. Walmart, that's a favorite. That's a hard one. That's a hard one. And my gal back in Massachusetts, she's way over 400 pounds, so she's been using that strategy. That's one of her new strategies. Unfortunately, they're not doing the right thing. They keep talking to her. So let's see what we can do. Here's what not to do. just don't panic and look like you're panicked. Oh my God, we're in a storm. Just calm yourself down. Calm yourself down first. And don't yell or threaten. You can't say, if you don't get up right now, you're not gonna get your whatever. That'll make it worse. Now she's really upset. You have to appear to be in control, because she's not. She's trying to be, but she's not. Don't talk too much. And don't negotiate. That's what they want. I watched this one girl who wouldn't get on the bus from a day program to go home. You know, day program, it's 4 o'clock, they wanna leave. They've been there all day. So they're like surrounding her. Well, what about this? Well, what about that? And I caught her eye at one point, and she just, because I had a good relationship with her, she just gave me this little smile. And I was like, you devil. You're just waiting for the best deal, you know? And so don't do that. Don't negotiate. And if you're in a place where there's other people, especially in public, you need to say, it's okay, folks, I know her, this is something that happens, I can handle it. And it would be really helpful if you'd step away. What to do? One person be in charge if you're with others. And again, fewer words. Honey, I can see that you're really upset right now, and I really want to talk to you about it when you're ready. You can get up now and we can finish our shopping, or you can stay for another few minutes, and it's up to you. You decide. And then walk away and make sure you really are walking, not like this, but like this. So, assuming someone keep an eye on it. And then come back in 3 minutes and say, did you make your decision? Did you make your decision? And if you're lucky, they said, yeah, because you gave them a choice. You protected their dignity. And you're not dragging them. And you're not making a spectacle by surrounding them. And you know what? They could sit there for hours. If it's a situation where it's not the middle of the road, if it's in the house or the day program, as long as you have someone to supervise, no, let them sit. They don't. It's not fun if you're not talking to them. There's no thinking. Forget it. Once they decide something, it's what it is. One of the problems they have with making friends is, I have my set of rules and you have your set of rules, and nobody's gonna compromise. So when we play a game, you're wrong. That's not how you do it. You know, so you have to, and staff really need to help facilitate that kind of thing. The outbursts are often over a food issue, a perceived sense of unfairness, or something is in conflict with one of their OCD things, which even typical people with OCD would freak out over. Again, frustration of the task, I don't think I can do that. Or often it's a misunderstanding in communication. You said too much at once. All I heard was, what is the comic strip where it goes blah, 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 blah? Peanuts?
Charlie Brown.
Charlie Brown. That's what's happening. And then they get upset when you say, how come you didn't? Or, and they don't, again, poor expression. They're not saying, well, you know what? After you say go upstairs, I didn't get the rest. They can't say that to you, even though that's exactly what happened. One of the reasons to have menus is to be able, if they have food questions about what is it, how much, again, less is more, stop talking. Here's the menu. When things are unfair, you should have those rituals or routines or who gets what when in writing. Then you just go, here's here's the schedule. This you just have to know. We all have our rituals. I don't know what the hell I do in a group home. If I was forced to take my shower in the morning, that's what I take. At night, I wouldn't be able to handle it. I have to take a shower in the morning. What are some things? We take away a lot when people move into a group setting. So try and remember that. And to the extent possible, I always ask, what's the routine like at home? When do they take their shower? When do they nap? When this, when that? And let that be part of their lives. We assume they're just gonna fit in. Sometimes we need to change our expectations if we're seeing frustration or breakdown of tasks. And again, remember, poor short-term memory. They are gonna misunderstand if you're doing. The perceived unfairness, we talked about that. Lying and stealing. It usually involves money or food. When it's not that, like in a group home, they just want what you have, or because they don't like you, or they want it for themselves, which is why we have locked bedrooms. I think I told the story yesterday about this one group home I was in. There was Johnny and Frankie. And Frankie had Johnny's sweatshirt, or so Johnny said. So the psychologist was there, and I'm just sitting in a corner. And so the psychologist says, so Frankie, is that Johnny's sweatshirt? No, it's mine. Where'd you get it? My sister gave it to me for Christmas. Now, Johnny's over there having a shit fit, right? Because that's his sweatshirt. And, oh, your sister gave it to you. Well, it looks a little small for you. He's a much bigger guy. He goes, oh, it's shrunk in the laundry. Well, what was the next thing? Oh, she was looking, she says, oh, but Johnny's name is in it. He took it and wrote his name. Johnny can't write. He had someone else do it. This went on and on. I was hysterical. Lying? Yeah. And maybe he really convinced himself that it was his. What I would have done, I'm sure I would have gotten written up for something, because everybody gets written up for blowing their nose around here. I would have taken the sweatshirt and given it to Johnny. Frankie, whoever it was. Enough said. Sometimes you have to act like a mother. Allegations of abuse. Do you have a problem with that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know you have to report those things. But definitely, you keep a record of there's always someone who does it a lot. And it's good for the people who have to investigate to know that. And I'm gonna get you fired. I'm gonna tell my mother, you hit me, any number of things. And they do that because they're mad at you. Maybe they wanted some food you didn't give them, or something else that you took away. Or they may want to get kicked out to go home. I had a case in New Mexico where this guy, oh my God, he accused his manager of sexual abuse, giving him drugs, taking him to his apartment. It went on and on and on. And he must have had 10 people interviewing him. First mistake, because the story started with, he took me to his apartment and gave me food. By the time the 10 people, every time, he took me to his apartment and gave me food and drugs. He took me to his apartment, gave me food and drugs, and had sex. I mean, the story just, because he was getting all this attention and watching people go, right? you have to know how to interview someone with Prader-Willi syndrome. It's not the same. Anyway, it didn't take me very long to I read his social history. I know it was clear his mom was pretty protective. It was clear she had ambivalence, and he did go home a lot, and he was obese when he came in, and he knew she would pull him out if anything happened to him. He was smart. But the poor manager, out of work for a while, and I think it just wasn't right for him. It was just so mean. So, somatic complaints, sometimes they complain of something to get out of what's going on, or to get medicine. A lot of them like their medicine. So you need to know who it is. They do make up grand stories. My father was a fireman and he rescued 20 people during 9/11. Part true, part not. One guy said to me, I'm married just a girl who lives in Ohio, and we have 3 children. My response was, would you show me your bedroom? You don't want to reinforce it, but you don't want to say, yeah, right. No, really, like the sweatshirt thing. You'll just keep going and going and going. I met her here, I met her there, and here, blah, blah, blah. Just don't try and get them to tell the truth. We used to have that as a goal in the old days, to maintain clear skin and to tell the truth. We don't do that anymore. Elopement usually happens when they're angry, they're seeking food, they want to get out of the existing situation. Sometimes they want an adventure, they've had it, or they're trying to go home. I had a couple of occasions where people eloped, and this is in New York City, ended up in homeless shelters, and they just wanted out. One of the girls, who was brilliant, bilingual, she was in a nursing home, I think, was it German she spoke? Translating letters for the residents. And she had a job coach initially. She was doing so great. The job coach backed off a little. Doing so great, backed off more. Doing so great, no longer in the building. She takes off, ends up in the homeless shelter. God bless her. She convinces the homeless shelter person that she's a diabetic, and she was, and she needs to get to a hospital. And so they took her to a hospital. So she's sitting with the caseworker, and she gave a fake name and a fake story. She had lived in an adult home. When you don't get care, you just pay a few bucks. And that's when she got obese. And that's what she wanted to get back to. So, and she said, and she was so smart, you would never know that there was a disability. And so the caseworker's writing all this down, thinking, well, I can call here, I'll call there. She would have gotten away with it had she not given her actual Social Security number. Busted. An elopement, like I told you about the girl who just was hungry, it's often unpredictable, which is why we do a lot of windows and doors. A lot of people assume, I will say, Prader-Willi folks are bipolar. I don't think most of them are, but it is tenuous. They could be pretty happy 1 minute, and then something hits them, and they're like, ah. Again, turn demands into requests, turn negatives into positives. They're very sensitive to how you talk to them, I think. And don't say that, if you don't calm down, you'll lose your points, your reward. You might as well stick a knife in them, because that's just reminding them of what they won't get. If it's a crisis, now I know you're skip trained, but not all of those kinds of trainings really work for Prader-Willi syndrome. we'll get to that. Give the person space. Definitely, I know this, you know, low neutral tones, very few words. Look for any environmental triggers. Is there someone in the room the person hates, whether it's a staff person or another resident? Is it noisy? Is the TV too loud? So do that. Make sure people are out of the way and they're not getting a lot of attention. And any items, if you know that the person engages in property destruction. Don't refer to consequences. If you don't, I won't. Or, you know, that just makes it worse. You can't win with a power struggle. You want to try and get them unstuck. They're stuck on something, and often people in these states are repeating themselves, and it may not even feel like it makes sense. But you need to know your limits too, because if you need to know when you've had it, and tap someone else in, of course, because you can't contribute to the crisis. It's good to know their precursor behaviors. If you can catch them, I mean, they go 0 to 60, but if you can catch them before the crisis, try and do something upbeat. Hey, I could really use your help on this. Could you, just to get them out of that mode. And the other thing is, and I see this a lot, is standing above people. That's a really bad thing to do. So, hey, could you help me out? Putting da-da-da-da. It's just so much less threatening. And I know our mothers did this. Barbara Joan Goff, you get over here. Of course, when they say your whole name, you know you're in trouble. During or after the crisis, flat, no intonation, you're not angry, you're not sad, you're not anything. And make sure though that you don't want to get too close, because then you're creating a fight or flight situation, which you don't want to have. Give the person space, and you don't want to get hurt. And act like I have all the time in the world. Because if you start showing that we gotta move, we gotta do this, we gotta do that, they're just gonna have a sit-down strike. Now I want to just quickly show you the difference between, some of the differences between UPD and deletion, and this is good for you to know, so try and find out. More likely to skip it, doesn't mean the others don't. Good puzzle skills. Good memory for directions, places, not directions you've given them. So use that. Find out if any of your folks are, I would love to have someone like that, because I have no sense of direction. Their behaviors seem to mellow with age, and food issues are bigger than other behavioral issues. Now, with UPD, they have more of the autistic features that we see, better verbal skills. They can get more stuck and argumentative, and they have a greater risk for psychosis, and unfortunately, 60 to 80%. It's really like, it's a high percentage of people with UPD who end up getting into a psychotic stage of some kind, and you need to know that, because then you can try and see it coming. And usually going into a psychotic episode often just follows changes, even little changes. Doesn't mean they can't have episodes too. None of this is isolated to one or the other, but this is important for you to know. They have higher rates of ADHD. Oh great, just what you need. Higher rates of vocal or motor tics, so saying blah, 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 you know. And they seem to gain skills as they age, and their behavior issues are bigger than the food issues. You have some people who don't really care about food that much, I'm sure. So I want you to get all your guys tested, because that psychosis thing is really important. I know Lisa just had an episode. I don't know if she's UPD or deletion. Be interesting to find out. And she's had some stuff going on that I'm not surprised pushed her to that point. I'm not gonna go into the work thing, I'm sorry, there just isn't time, because some people do have a 4-year college degree, by the way. They had to have somebody with them all the time. Although this one mother, years ago, she wrote in one of the newsletters that her son really wanted to go to college. She let him go to college. She didn't have anyone with him. He gained so much weight and died. And she said, well, at least he died doing something he wanted to do. I could have punched her out because he could have lived if he had supports and do what he wanted to do. But just remember, it's an anxiety disorder. They feel out of control, so they're gonna batten down the hatches. Our job is to relieve the anxiety. Never forget their powerful drive to seek food. They can't help it. And they don't have coping skills. I know everybody has a goal for coping skills. In school, here, that's great, but they need a staff person to help them use them. They're not gonna be independent with that. Never, ever try to win an argument. Don't even bother. The sky, they say it's yellow, the sky, it's yellow. Who the hell cares? So persistence on your part, resistance on theirs. Who's shooting at it? That's the first thing I think of nowadays. I created this really sophisticated poem for you. You've heard it before, try and ignore. The more words spoken, the more things broken. Instead of talking, do some walking. Reviewing the fight will make it ignite. And when it finally ends, just be friends. Just like with your children. They drove you crazy all day, they were horrible. You put them to bed, you give them a kiss, and you say, tomorrow's another day. They're one day at a time people. You need to communicate more amongst yourselves. We had a managers meeting and they didn't even know there were other people with Prader Willi around. You do need a thick skin. They will find your Achilles heel and you need a sense of humor. So speaking of a sense of humor, I've got two, I think, funny stories. Because I like to end on a happy note. Here's a sex story. So there's this guy, he had a girlfriend, and he wanted to have sex with her. They provided sex ed for him and for his girlfriend. It was determined they were both consenting. And at one point when he was asked, what do you mean by having sex? He replied, that's when you get a hotel room, order a pizza, and watch a movie. And a lot of them will say, I read a lot of comments from people with Prader-Willi syndrome about sex. Most of them, and they don't often have sex, but they have relationships, they want relationships, they rarely have intercourse, often, well, if it's with a Prader-Willi guy, his penis is too small. They really just want a boyfriend and girlfriend. They want affection. Now, my last story. This took place in Cape Cod, years ago. And years ago, in this particular community, nobody locked their doors. And there was this one group home, it had 4 guys in it. And its back door abutted the neighbors, you just had to cross the lawn. And an older gentleman lived there by himself. One of the residents was 88, and nobody could figure out how. And they didn't have night awake staff in those days, by the way. They shadowed him to work. They followed him everywhere he went, checked his menu, they checked his day program, could not figure out where he was getting food. Then one staff person said, well, I'm gonna stay up tonight and see if there's anything that's happening then. That was the only thing they hadn't covered. Sure enough, the guy comes down the stairs, up from his bedroom, goes out his back door, crosses the yard, goes into the back door of the gentleman's house, takes an immediate left, because you know how you always end up in the kitchen at the back door. There's a pantry. He goes inside, takes a loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter. Well, he got snacked, right? Because somebody's. So now we know how he gained his weight. So the next day, the staff brought him over to Mr. So-and-so's house to confess. And Johnny's been coming into your house regularly and taking your bread and taking your peanut butter. And he said, oh, thank God. I'd get up in the morning, I'd go down to my pantry to get my bread for toast and my peanut butter, and it wouldn't be there. So I'd go to the grocery store, I'd buy a loaf of bread and a jar of peanut butter, and put it in my pantry. And then I'd come down in the morning, and it isn't there. I was so scared to tell my daughter because I thought she'd put me away. So that was a happy ending to a story. But they do amazing things. I could spend hours telling you food stories of Prader-Willi syndrome. That would blow your mind. But I didn't have time today. You'll have to invite me back. Thank you for